I'd like to thank my patrons for their generous support. It helps to make my research, writing, and videos available to everyone. If you enjoy my videos, please like them, share them, and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to support my work, then please visit my Patreon page and look into becoming a patron. The link is below this video. So the word Tua means a group of people, a tribe, that sort of thing. And De refers to deity, refers to God or a god of some kind. In the earliest medieval manuscripts, the phrase used for this race of god people is often just Tuatha Dé. But then the Irish started using the same word, Tuatha Dé, or phrase, to talk about the children of Israel in the Old Testament. So they had to call the god, the indigenous gods, something else. So then they started calling them the Tuatha Dé Danann. And Danann is a little harder to unpick. So I mentioned last week how many words for important concepts in Celtic languages have a lot of layers of meaning. And that's the case for this Danann. So Danann appears to be the possessive form of a name, or the genitive, as it's called in Celtic languages, that the god people belong to. So the god people belong to this Danann entity. So we don't use apostrophe S to show possession in Goidelic languages. We change the spelling and pronunciation of the proper name instead. So when we talk about somebody's dog, Susan's name changes. So based on the rules of how that works, that name is usually reconstructed as Danu, whom I'm sure you've heard of. Problem is, there's no Danu ever mentioned in the Irish medieval texts. It's a reconstructed name. But for whatever reason, most modern people believe that there was a goddess called Danu. And when I say most modern people, I mean lay people and academics often do accept the existence of a Danu. If that's correct, then that name would probably be cognate with the Brythonic goddess Dawn, and perhaps the goddess of the river Danube in Europe, whose name we're not sure of, might be something like Donau. But you can see there are a lot of maybes here. Now there's another mother goddess mentioned in medieval texts called Anu or Anand or Anna. They may not always be the same entity. The old Book of Invasions is a confused, tangled thing. So Anand is associated with the Morrigan in one text. And Anna, who may not be the same as Anand, is described as the mother of the gods in another text. So the connection between this and Danann is a bit tentative, but it's also a possibility. But there's more to this than that. The word Dana, which I seem not to have written up on the screen, but it's D-A fada, that's A with a accent thing over it, N-A. The word Dana means skills or crafts in Irish. And the Tuatha Dé Danann are sometimes called the Isdana, which means the people of skill or the people of craft. So there's some missing links in all this, but it's definitely not beyond the likes of the early bards to alter the forms of words to make them sound better together, or to emphasize the layers of meaning that belong to them. So personally, I'm quite happy to accept these meanings as a combined set of meanings, but that might not be the most scholarly way to look at it, I will admit. Now then, the important Irish texts like the Book of Invasions and the Second Battle of Mag Tuired spend a lot of time talking about the skills that the gods possessed. So while everyone is to some extent represented as a warrior, even the women, skilled in battle, Many are singled out individually or in groups based on some skill or craft. So we have individuals like Govnu the smith and Jan Kech the physician, Kredne the brazier, or worker in soft metals. We have categories of people like cupbearers and sorcerers and poets who aren't even named sometimes. And then, of course, we have the god Lu. I'm going to talk about him quite a lot today, but just briefly, he's known for possessing all skills and all skills in equal measure. This guy can do everything really well. And there are two famous passages in the Second Battle of Mag Tuired, one where Lu lists all of his own skills in order to gain entry into the Tuatha Dé Danann's stronghold because they don't know him yet. And later, when they've accepted him as king and they're preparing for war, there's a sequence where he asks the different skilled categories what they will contribute to the battle. Just to summarize this, the Tuatha Dé Danann are the god people. They're the Tuatha Dé. They're the people of the goddess Anna or Danu, probably. And they are the people of skill and art. There are a couple more questions. Where did they come from? Where did they go? So I'll give you the mythological answer to this. A brief history of the Tuatha Dé's part in the Book of Invasions. In your document, there'll be a summary of the whole thing. The Book of Invasion turns up in quite a few versions, as I've already said, in lots of different manuscripts. It's long, it's complex, it's not the easiest thing in the world to read. It tells how Ireland was invaded or settled 6 times by 6 different groups of people. So briefly, the first 2 groups of invaders just had terrible luck and they died out. The third group was led by a guy called Nevid, and they come next. And they get into a war with an indigenous race called the Fomorians or Favora. And the Favora are mostly described as monsters, horrible, misshapen creatures who maybe live in the sea or in islands and cause a lot of trouble for Ireland's various attempted settlers. But the Favora are sometimes also described as looking more like humans, so it's a bit fluid. Anyway, Nevid's people and the Favora are having a battle on a beach. And this huge wave comes and drowns most of them. A few escape in boats, a few of the Nemedians, as we call them, Nevid's people. And of those people, one group goes south and they end up in Greece. They become enslaved. The other group go north. After a few generations, the ones who were enslaved in Greece decide they're going to return to Ireland and try again. So they've now become known as the Fir Bolg, the men of the bag, because in their enslavement, they had to carry stuff in bags. Well, what happened to the people who went north? Well, they ended up somewhere called the 4 cities of the north. And the names and descriptions of these 4 cities don't really fit into geography, although people have tried to make it do that. It just doesn't work. So let's just say that they're magical, otherworldly places. So these people who went north to the 4 cities, they learn all kinds of magic and artistic skill and crafts. And they also gain a magical sword, a magical spear, a magical cauldron, and a magical stone, which is to be used in the coronation of kings. And these people now call themselves the Tuatha Dé Danann. So that's where they've come from. So long story short, they return to Ireland. They offer to split Ireland with the Fir Bolg. The Fir Bolg don't trust them, so they end up going to war. And that story is told in the first Battle of Mag Tuired. So the Tuatha Dé Danann defeat the Fir Bolg, and they do okay for a bit, but they're having trouble choosing a king. I'm not going to go into the reasons for that. Some of you will know. They end up choosing a guy who's half Tuatha Dé Danann and half Fomorian. And he turns out not to be a good king. So they end up at war with the Fomorians. And they defeat them in the second Battle of Mag Tuired. So once again, things go okay for a while. The Tuatha Dé Danann have defeated the Fomora, and then some distant cousins of the Tuatha Dé show up. So all these waves of invaders are all coming from the same ancestral group. One way or another, they're related. And that's probably because the Irish medieval redactors had to make everything fit with Noah's flood. And people had to be related in order to reconcile the mythology with the Bible. But anyway, these people, these distant ancient cousins of the Tuatha Dé show up, and they're called the sons of Mill, or the Milesians. And they're taken to be the Gaels who now inhabit Ireland. So the Tuatha Dé tell them that if they can sail their ship out over 9 waves and return, they can just have Ireland. Interesting approach to negotiation. But the Tuatha Dé Danann druids then raise a big wind to keep them away from the shore, thinking, aha, we've got you. But eventually, the Milesian druid poet, a guy called Avergan, stills the wind and recites this beautiful, powerful druid poem. So they make peace with each other. And the Tuatha Dé Danann agree to go and live in the mounds, while the Milesians, or the Gaels, or the people who are in Ireland now, take Ireland above the ground. So that's a very interesting ending to this story. So she, if you don't know, is the word for fairy, in a very general sense. And the mounds are hills, mostly tumuli or Neolithic tombs, sometimes including things like some hill forts or just hills with legends attached to them. The Tuatha Dé Danann don't always really stay under the ground very dependably. They frequently turn up in the other mythological cycles, as I've said. And where they live doesn't seem to be exactly synonymous with the other world that we associate with Manannán Mac Líre's other world. Both the other world, or worlds, and the Tuatha Dé Danann themselves are still kind of quite present after this agreement. They're still kind of immanent in the apparent world. But Tua is way better than Tuatha. You've made a great leap forward if you can say Tua.